And welcome back to Houston Newsmakers, where I'm joined by Professor Jim Granado, the Executive Director of the Hobby Center for Public Affairs at the University of Houston, and Joe Barnes, a former State Department diplomat and Bonner Means Baker Research Fellow at the Baker Institute of Foreign Policy at Rice University. Let's talk about foreign policy. President Obama went on his final trip overseas, and a lot of the leaders there have been just as surprised as many of the folks in the United States about the outcome of this election. How important is it for the rest of the world to have a clear, or as clear as possible, understanding about what our foreign policy is?
It's very important. I mean, and the comments he made during the campaign are not inspiring. They're inspiring this uncertainty and frankly, fear, whether he's talking about NATO or China or Russia or many other things that he said. It's inciting. He's saying things that most American presidents don't say and don't do.
Do we really have an idea about what his foreign policy is going to be? He really hasn't talked about it very much because this election cycle was based less on policy than it was on personality.
Yeah, look, I think there's a huge amount of uncertainty now around the world, but I think there's also a great deal of uncertainty here about what Trump's foreign policy will be. He's a man who said a lot of things about foreign policy over the primary and the general election campaign. A lot of it was contradictory. Right now, it is simply unclear what sort of foreign policy he will have, and we may get some useful evidence when we see the final makeup of his foreign policy team. Might give us some hints.
You talked, both of you alluded earlier about what kind of things that they may be able to agree on as a Trump administration early on, and that brings to mind the Obama legacy, whatever it is, both internationally and domestically. What issues or what things did President Obama put into place that you think are most likely to fall by the wayside as a result of the Trump administration?
Several executive orders are in danger. That just takes a stroke of a pen. That'll be the first thing. Second thing is Obamacare is going to be changed. Who knows how much, but it's going to be changed significantly. The Iran deal, I suspect that's going to be revisited as well. Those are the three things I can think off the top of my head.
And I also think we should probably add in our sort of commitments on climate change at Paris.
What does that do to the world order? I mean, what people have mostly been saying is with this unusual candidate, this world order is going to be changed unlike we've seen it in quite some time.
Well, it depends a lot on what exactly he does. For instance, what happens if he goes to NATO and scolds our NATO allies about their unwillingness to pay more, and all our NATO allies sort of sign a piece of paper saying they'll do a better job of meeting their obligations? Will Donald Trump take that piece of paper, put it in his pocket, and call it a victory? I don't know. I just don't know.
I've heard comments about the Republican Party now with the Trump faction and the traditional Republicans, it's like it's a coalition, if you will, and that it's going to be different in terms of how they move forward, unlike anything we've seen. So how different is that going to be for us to adjust to in terms of the way things get done in Washington?
Well, I mean, on certain issues they're going to agree, and I do believe if they follow what you learn in Presidency Administration 101 is you hit the ground running and you take the policies that you agree on, but also there's something in progress. So you're looking at Obamacare, the Republican replacement, they're going to agree on that. They're going to agree on some aspect of tax reform. There's already proposals out there. So these things, there's coalitions around them. You know that you can count the votes, get those things done relatively quickly. The thing they're going to have trouble with is going to be trade. I think that's when you're going to see the break start. And it's not just with Republicans. In 1994 with NAFTA, Bill Clinton had to work with the Republicans to get NAFTA passed. It was the Democrats that broke with him.
How about the infrastructure? Well, once upon a time, that was an issue, and so, Republicans said, wait a minute, that is too much money. We're not going to do that.
Well, look, it's interesting. Trump's talked a lot about infrastructure. Indeed, notably, when he came down on the night he was elected, he spent a good amount of time emphasizing infrastructure. Now, first of all, what sort of infrastructure bill is it going to be? Is it going to be tax credits for new construction, or is it going to be actual federal outlays for building? This is unclear. And this is where he may run into some problem on the Hill, not necessarily with Democrats, but with Republicans, because I gather that, for instance, the future majority leader in the Senate, I mean the current majority leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, has already signaled that he's not quite as interested in an infrastructure bill as Donald Trump.
they all have said that no matter what happens, it's important for them to work together and make progress on behalf of, as Senator Cruz said, it was a mandate from the American people. And folks who voted for Hillary Clinton would say, well, it was an electoral college win, but it really wasn't a mandate because she had almost 1 million more votes. What is the challenge of trying to move forward with that kind of reality? Or do they just ignore that because they did win the election? So let's move on forward and don't worry about what the sound is from out there.
They've got a majority of both houses of Congress. They've got the White House. They will reach out to Democrats when it helps, doesn't defeat their purposes. It's smart politics to do that. Ronald Reagan did that very well in the early 80s, and I think he seems to be a pragmatist more than an ideologue, so look for him to try and build coalitions where he can, as long as it doesn't subvert his purposes.
I agree, and here's the thing. I don't think that Mitch McConnell or Paul Ryan really care that Hillary Clinton ran up a 3 million vote majority in California, right? A mandate is precisely what the president and the Congress makes it.
On that note, we'll end. But I want to take your classes, both of you. As long as I get an A, I can audit it and not get an A or D. Dr. Granado, thank you. Joe Barnes, always good to see you both, and we'll look forward to having you back again. Let's talk as we get further into this Trump administration.